We'll be doing a little presentation on component-based theming, and I'll probably be using the slideshow very little because I'll be bouncing back and forth between this and Pattern Lab and the actual code. So the last presentation I gave, I kind of did a little bit of an introduction to like Pattern Lab, what it is, what it's going to be used for. This one's going to be more in an actually showing the step-by-step process of going from Pattern Lab and actually integrating your components into the workflow. So what I'll be showing is kind of a workflow that I've been developing kind of off and on the last 2 or 3 months. So here's kind of what you need in your Drupal install for all this to work. First of all, you'll need Pattern Lab Drupal Edition. I'm recommending Sheila Starter Theme and Sheila Starter Kit. That's what I started with, and then I just kind of built my own, but using that as a starting point. The starter kit's really nice. It comes with a gulp file and like a Bower configuration that installs all the dependencies that you need, and already has like the gulp task set up for like compiling the Sass into CSS and copying your templates over to Pattern Lab, things like that. You also need gulp and Bower for installing the dependencies and like running the different watchers. You'll use the component libraries module. Basically, that just allows you to do twig includes without having to do anything hacky inside of Drupal. The paragraphs module, which is kind of how we're implementing the components, and then this distill module, which is kind of a handy little tool. So if you've ever looked at a Drupal node, the structure is kind of a mess where you've got like the node and then the field, and then they've got like the language code, and then they've got like 0, 1, 2, 3 if you've got multiple values, and drilling down to get the value you need sometimes is a nightmare. Distill basically just, it provides a tool to really quickly grab the value you need. All right, so it's kind of a quick introduction, so I'll just kind of take you through it then. So this is the custom theme that I started building out that we're going to be using for the components. Most of it's fairly standard. We've got a few things that are going to be unique that aren't in normal Drupal themes, though. First one is we have Pattern Lab. So we've got that installed just in the theme itself, which is nice because that way you don't have to maintain 2 separate repositories. You can use the Drupal repo for both the prototype and the final site. So that's in there. We also have the source directory, which we'll talk about in just a minute, which is where we're keeping all of our Sass and our templates. And we've got a gulp file here. This is basically just one I slightly modified from the Sheila theme. It's got a few different tasks in here. It has one that watches for your Sass changes and automatically compiles those to CSS. And it also has a few for copying the patterns. Yeah, and yeah, that's just kind of what I was talking about there, just all the different things that gulp is doing. All right, so let's kind of take a look at this. So the first thing we're going to do is start up Pattern Lab. So I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right directory here. Go into the theme. And all we do is we run gulp, just that single word command, and that will start all of the watchers, and it'll launch Pattern Lab in your browser automatically. So if you're a front-end developer that is working just on the prototype, you don't need to set up like a full PHP server. It'll just launch this lightweight one for you to work on Pattern Lab for like the style guide and prototype stuff. And you can see it's pretty bare. The only thing I've added to Pattern Lab is this banner template. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like real quick. So we'll go into let's see, themes, custom. So I'm keeping everything inside of the source directory, and then gulp will copy that into Pattern Lab once I update anything. So here we have our patterns. We'll go into molecules, and then we've got one called banner.twig. So that is the twig template for that particular element you're looking at. And we've got a few different variants of it as well. So I'm just including those 3 different variants, and then I'm passing in a variable for the different colors of background. So we've got style modifier, and then that gets passed to there. So that's kind of how all of that's getting rendered. All right, and just a couple of notes on like the different naming patterns in Pattern Lab. You'll see some of them have numbers, some of them have underscores. So those do mean things in Pattern Lab. So the numbers don't really affect anything functionally, but it allows you to order it. So like, let's say I've got 4 or 5 different molecules and I want in order in the style guide. You can add number prefixes so that they show up in the order you want them to. You can also do an underscore prefix. So that means it won't show up in Pattern Lab, but you can still use it in includes. So that's what I was doing here. So I wanted to show all the different variations of the banner, but I didn't want to show the original template itself. And so I just named it with the underscore. So only this one would show up. And then you can also name a file with the exact same file name as your template, but give it a .json extension, and you can pass sample data in there, which is what I've done here. So how that works is when banner.twig is loaded, it'll look for one called banner.json, and then you basically just put in your name value pairs, and that's what'll get plugged in there. So we've got header description, and then header and description there. All right, so that's kind of the basics. So I think it'll be a little easier if we actually walk through and create one ourselves. So we're going to start with Pattern Lab first. So I'm going to create, let's do a call to action banner. And that will basically just be like the one we just created, but we'll have a little button that says, go here or do something. On CTA banner.twig. You just write this like a normal HTML template. So we'll go div class. Okay. And then we'll go, let's see, we probably need a title. So these curly braces, if you're not familiar with Twig, that just means we're going to print a variable called title there eventually.
The spaces between the curly braces and
I think it's just coding standard. I think it'll print it either way. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's just a coding standard. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll just do just the title and a button. So we'll do ahref equals button path. We'll give this one a class too. So this will be CTA banner button. And then this will be the button text here. All right, let's give this one a class too. My CSS naming conventions okay there, Irina? Okay, good. All right, and so we've got gulp watching. So as soon as we refresh this, we should see the template. Let's try that again. As soon as we refresh that, we should see the template. Okay. Maybe.
do we have to define the variables or put a JSON file, or it just kind of puts?
Yeah, for right now, it'll probably end up just printing a blank one. Let me see what's going on there. Twig, okay. Not sure if that re-rendered it or not. Let's try running gulp again. Okay, There it goes, CTA banner. And if I inspect that, you'll see the markup, but we don't have any variables getting passed in right now. So it's just going to be empty. Yeah. Come on, show me the markup. Equal balance variance. Yep, there it is. CTA banner, our title, and our button. And right now they're just empty. So next step is we need to provide some sample data. So we'll just create a new file, and it'll be named exactly the same. Or we'll give it a .json ending. Okay, and what did I call those? Title, button path, and button text. What should our title be? How about "Buy Our Awesome Thing"? Button path, we'll just have it go to example.com. And then our button text will be "Order Now." I'm liking something that I did single quotes and double quotes mixed. Okay. All right. And Gulp should have done something magical, I hope. And when we hit refresh, Gulp, you're embarrassing me. It should be watching it and updating it in real time. But oh, "Buy Our Awesome Thing, order now." There it goes. All right, cool. So we've got that done. So the next step in our workflow would be to add some CSS. So we go into our Sass folder in components. So I think ideally we'd probably be breaking out and having a separate Sass file for each different component. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to dump it all into here. Heading and front-end developers just try not to cringe too much. Okay, so we need, let's give it a background color. That looks nice. Okay, and then we've got button, what did I call it again? CTA banner underscore button. Make that just actually look like a button instead of just a link. 10 pixels, 10 pixels. Let's do background color on this one, just something that stands out a little bit more, like green. And make it round. Okay. Oh, hey, look, it updated in real time that time. Awesome. Also, I want to center align that because it looks terrible. Injected clean CSS. Cool. All right, so we made our CTA banner. Ugh, blue background on the text. Let's fix that too. All right, okay, that looks better. All right, so we've created it in Pattern Lab now. So the next step is going to be moving that into Drupal. So I'm in my website right now, so we'll need to create a new paragraph type. We'll call this one CTA banner.
Right. How is Pattern Lab getting the styles? How does it know where to look for the CSS styles?
Magic. Yeah, so I can show you really quick. Yeah, so I believe it's in Pattern Lab config.yaml. So It has a few things that are just part of Pattern Lab's core. But I think it basically just looks for, maybe it's inside of the.
Is it maybe set up because this is the Drupal edition of Pattern Lab? It already has that configured.
Yeah, like, so when the gulp file runs, it copies everything into this. Okay, so public file, this is where the rendered like templates and like the CSS go. So basically when the gulp file runs, it will take everything inside of that source folder and it'll render it to static HTML, and then it also compiles the SAS files into CSS and it copies them into this directory. So all of my styles that I just created are inside of here. And I'm trying to find the exact configuration, but I think Pattern Lab just has a config that basically tells it to load everything in this folder. And yeah, I don't know all the under the hood stuff that Pattern Lab does, but that's basically what's happening. Yep, as long as you know how to run the gulp command, it just kind of does it for you though. All right. So we need a few different fields on here. So we need one text field for the title. Actually, I've got an existing one from another thing that I can probably just reuse, so we'll do that. And then we need another one for button text. And we'll do one last field for the button path. All right, cool. And then I've got a sample node here that already has some paragraphs, so we'll just add another paragraph. Okay, so what should we have this header say? Have anything snappy, Travis?
Hurry before we run out.
And then the button text. Get it now? Does that work? Button path. I'll send them over to Amazon and give them some free advertising. Why not? Okay, let's go look at the actual node. So these are ones that I created a little bit earlier. Those are using the regular banner that we saw earlier in Pattern Lab. And here's our new one. So it has no styling on it, and we'll fix that in just a minute. So what we're doing here is I created a little bit of custom magic inside of our theme that allows us to basically pull in our twig templates from Pattern Lab. So how that works, we've got this little pre-processed paragraph thing that will look for a matching, field mapping thing. So here's one I created for the existing one. So we just specify the component template we want to use, and then we say which of the variables in the template match to the Drupal field, and then it just pre-populates those. And I had to override the default paragraph template to make that happen. So let me pull that up just so you can kind of see what it looks like. Okay, so it's basically the standard template that comes with the paragraph modules. I just overrode it to look, so if we have a component template variable, then you'll render that component template with component values that we're going to set in our mappings. Otherwise, just do the Drupal thing and just chunk out the content that you get from the render engine. All right, so let's create our mapping template. So it just needs to be named paragraph dash dash and then the name of the bundle, which is CTA banner. Okay.
And are these mapping templates, is that a D8 thing or?
This is something that I created, and it's still pretty early in development. So right now it's really basic. So if you had, you know how like image builds, they've got like the image path and like the height and width. It's like a compound field where it's got multiple values. Like I don't have it set up to handle that type of stuff yet, but that's kind of the direction it needs to go next. So component template, so that's what we did in the last one. We just copy and paste that. So this particular like shorthand is something that the component libraries module provides. So at molecules is just a shorthand pointing to this folder. And then the rest of it, I just fill in the path from that point. So in this case, it's going to be 08 banners, that's fine. And then we're pulling in CTA banner.twig. All right, and then we need to map out our fields. So if I go back to our, so we need title, button path, and button text. And then I need to go to Drupal to figure out what those actually are. Okay, so field header for the first one. All those field button path and field button text, if I remember right. And I need, yep, I need those in quotes.
That's just my paper.
Okay.
What's the shortcut for end of line in PHP Storm? It looks like that's
It's command and left and right for Mac. I don't know if they're, and that works everywhere on Mac, not just in PHP Storm. All right, so we've got that set up now. So if we go back here, it'll probably do nothing because I need to flush the caches, which we will do with Drupal console, which is an awesome tool if you haven't used it before. And the DSH you normally don't include. That's just because I'm using Druid for the virtual machine. Okay, so just flushed the caches, and now when I refresh, we should see the styles get applied there. There it is. And so you noticed I didn't have to write any styles for the Drupal theme. So that gulp task, when it compiled the styles, it copied that into the Drupal theme as well. So you style one place and it applies to both the theme and the other.
And is it smart enough to know, well, okay. I guess you would have to configure it if you had a multi-site that had different themes on the same site.
Yeah. And so if you needed to configure that differently, I think it's in config.json. Yeah, so you've got, this shows where your SAS is located at, and then the Drupal one, that shows where we want to copy CSS, that shows where we want to copy images. The patterns and templates directory I'm not really using because I'm just grabbing it directly from the source folder. That's just kind of left over from the starter kit I used. But yeah, that's how it's mapping it. So I don't know if it supports multiple CSS directories, but you would need to update the configuration for gulp to copy to both places if you wanted that. Yep, so that is basically the workflow. I'm trying to remember if there's, oh yeah, I skipped all these slides. Yeah, that's just kind of demonstrating. So I'll just kind of explain this really quick because I've seen a couple different workflows presented for how to manage this. And one of the things that always bothered me though is you couldn't just include the use the same template for both Pattern Lab and for Drupal because of this basic problem that Drupal expects very specific names for its templates in the fields in order for it to work. And so if you wanted to use the same template for both, your front-end developers would have to know this type of stuff up front, which a lot of times you don't, and it's just kind of ugly for a front-end developer who's not familiar with the Drupal backend to keep track of that. And then if you had the front-end developers during the prototype phase just give whatever names they wanted it to, you'd have to go and refactor all of their templates when you moved into Drupal, which is what we were doing on one of our other projects. And that became a huge time sink too, because what if you had already integrated it and the front-end developers changed the template? You'd have to go back and update it in your Drupal theme to match as well. So the way we're doing it here solves that problem. So what I showed you so far is just kind of magic. You saw that we created that .yaml file and it mapped everything across. But that kind of solves the basic problem. We let them create things with the names that they want to in Pattern Lab when they're doing the prototype. And when we create the Drupal theme, we don't have to refactor anything. We just create a field mapping and we can just keep their template exactly as it is. It just saves a lot of the back and forth that we were having to deal with. And if you're interested in that magic, we're using a plugin called Distill.
The plugin for what?
It's a Drupal module. The Drupal 8 version isn't on Drupal.org yet, so you have to get it directly off of GitHub. So if you're just to use his module in the raw, it kind of looks like this. So you'd say set field body and then what you want it to distill as. And that takes care of all of the normal stuff that you have to deal with in Drupal, where you have to like drill down 5 or 6 layers deep, where it's like node, arrow, field title, arrow, UND, arrow 0, arrow value. This just kind of does it all for you. And then it also renames it to something more user-friendly. If you don't want to do like field author, you can just call it user. So that's basically what I was doing. And I just added the YAML file to make it a little easier so you didn't have to write PHP every time you wanted to do those mappings. And this is the code that's actually doing that. So I am just parsing the YAML file and then it just cranks through a loop and sets up all those mappings using Distill. All right, so that's kind of the workflow I'm working on. It still needs a little bit more work. So one of the things I talked about is it still needs to improve the field mapping configuration. Right now, it only works for very, very simple field types. So if we need something that has multiple values or has like, you know, a compound field like images usually do. It still needs to be improved to add support for that. I'd also like to come up with a standardized way for organizing the SAS files. I think it would be ideal if we could have like a SAS file for each individual component. So you could basically just like grab it as a neat little package and use it in another project. But I'd kind of like to work with a front-end developer to get some ideas for that. And then I also haven't used this on a large complex project yet, so I don't know where the weak points are, but that's about where it is right now. Right, any other questions about that?
Yeah. So when you're talking about it still needs to be able to handle more complex fields, like I know with paragraphs, or I think paragraphs haven't really played too much. You can have paragraphs within paragraphs or nested paragraphs. Would it have a hard time with that at this point, or?
At this point, yeah. Like I'm just using, I know Distill can handle more things. Right now, I'm just assuming that like every field is going to hold like a single string or, you know, number or something really basic like that. This is just kind of still a proof of concept phase, so it should be possible to do all those things. I just don't have it developed out to that level yet. Yeah, so like paragraphs within paragraphs would probably still be an issue at this point.
And is all of this available somewhere? Do you have it in a repo somewhere that we can
Um,
access? Or?
That is on my to-do list.
Okay.
So yeah, I was originally using this for a client project, and so it had a lot of client-specific names in it. So I just finished refactoring that to make it more generic, and then I could probably even push what I have now onto GitHub after this meeting, so everyone can, you know, download it and start poking around at it if they'd like. And yeah, so I'll make a note to do that hopefully today, and then I'll post a link on Slack that everyone can look at.
I know. Awesome.
All right. Any other questions before I close the recording? All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your lunch. Thanks.
Thank you.